To understand the genius and sheer audacity of the Berlin Tunnel, we need to go back to how Berlin became the epicenter of Cold War espionage. After Germany's defeat in 1945, the Allied powers, the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, divided both Germany and its capital city Berlin into 4 occupation zones. Berlin itself, located deep within the Soviet-controlled East Germany, became a microcosm of the larger Cold War division. The western sectors of Berlin, controlled by the U.S., UK, and France, were islands of capitalism and democracy surrounded by a sea of communism. This geographic anomaly made West Berlin a critical strategic outpost. It was a beacon of freedom, a symbol of resistance, and a gaping hole in the Iron Curtain. For East Germans, West Berlin was a tantalizing escape route, a place where they could experience Western culture, goods, and ultimately freedom. Each day, hundreds of thousands of people crossed the sector borders for work, family visits, or simply to shop. This open border, while a source of hope for many, was also a massive headache for the Soviet Union and its East German allies. They viewed West Berlin as a bone in the throat, a center of Western espionage, and a drain on their own population. The Soviets understood the strategic importance of communication in a divided city. Key telephone cables, vital for military and civilian communications, ran underground throughout Berlin. Many of these cables, belonging to the East German telephone company Deutsche Post, passed directly through the western sectors. This meant that East German and Soviet military and intelligence communications were, by necessity, exposed to potential interception by Western powers. The CIA, along with its British counterpart, MI6, quickly recognized this vulnerability. The ability to tap into these lines would provide an unparalleled window into Soviet and East German operations. It would offer insights into military movements, political intentions, and the internal workings of the communist bloc. It was an intelligence gold mine just waiting to be exploited. But how to do it? The conventional methods of espionage, wiretaps, double agents, aerial reconnaissance, were either too risky, too limited, or simply impossible on this scale. The Soviets were notoriously vigilant. Any overt attempt to tap the cables would be swiftly detected and met with severe repercussions. A new approach was needed, something bold, something unprecedented, something that would allow them to listen in on the enemy's most secret conversations right under their noses without them ever knowing it. The stage was set for a clandestine operation that would push the boundaries of engineering, human endurance, and Cold War subterfuge, an operation so daring, so intricate, that it would become legend. The Berlin Tunnel. The idea for the Berlin Tunnel, initially conceived by the British Secret Intelligence Service MI6 in the early 1950s, was deceptively simple. Dig a tunnel from the American sector of West Berlin under the Soviet sector border and connect directly to the underground East German telephone cables. This wasn't just about tapping a few individual lines. It was about accessing entire bundles of cables, including those used by the Soviet military headquarters in Berlin, the East German Ministry of State Security, Stasi, and various other critical government and intelligence agencies. The British, with their extensive experience in clandestine operations, presented the audacious plan to the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. For the CIA, this was a dream come true. A direct line into the heart of Soviet communications was an intelligence coup beyond imagination. They eagerly agreed to collaborate, recognizing the immense potential value. The operation was codenamed Operation Gold by the Americans and Operation Stopwatch by the British. The first challenge was identifying the precise location of the target cables. This required meticulous intelligence gathering, mapping existing cable routes, and even sending agents into East Berlin to conduct covert surveys. Once the target junction was identified, the next hurdle was geological. Berlin's soil, a mix of sand, clay, and groundwater, presented significant engineering challenges. The tunnel would need to be deep enough to avoid detection, but not so deep as to become impractical or encounter insurmountable water tables. The engineers determined a depth of approximately 15 feet, 4.5 meters, would be optimal. The tunnel itself would need to be relatively narrow, about 6 to 8 feet, 1.8 to 2.4 meters, in diameter, to minimize the amount of excavated soil and the risk of collapse. To maintain secrecy, the entry point for the tunnel had to be unassuming and seemingly innocuous. The CIA secured a plot of land in the Outglienicke district of the American sector close to the Soviet border. On this plot, they began constructing what appeared to be a radar station. This elaborate cover story provided a plausible reason for heavy construction, large vehicles, and constant activity, diverting any suspicion from the true purpose of the operation. Behind the facade of the radar station, construction of a massive, multi-story warehouse began. This warehouse would serve as the operational base for the tunnel project, housing excavation equipment, living quarters for the workers, and most importantly, the highly specialized listening post. The warehouse's design incorporated a concealed entrance to the shaft leading down to the tunnel. The entire site was heavily guarded by American military personnel, further reinforced by the radar station cover story. Inside, the actual work of digging began. The excavated earth, thousands of tons of it, posed another significant challenge. How do you dispose of that much dirt without attracting attention in a densely populated city? The solution was ingenious. The earth was transported back into the radar station compound, mixed with concrete, and used in the construction of the building itself, or simply spread out and disguised within the large compound. The project involved an international team of engineers, technicians, and intelligence officers. American tunnel engineers, experienced in projects like subway construction, worked alongside British specialists in clandestine operations. The secrecy was paramount. Every worker, every engineer, every intelligence officer involved was subjected to rigorous background checks and sworn to absolute silence. The penalties for any breach of security were severe. The collaboration between the CIA and MI6 was remarkably smooth, a testament to the shared strategic goal. Each agency brought its unique expertise to the table. The British had the initial concept and significant experience in covert operations, while the Americans brought immense resources, engineering prowess, and a willingness to commit to a large-scale, high-risk venture. The target cables were made of lead and steel, requiring specialized tools to cut into without causing damage or interrupting communication. Once tapped, the signals from hundreds of individual telephone lines would need to be amplified, filtered, and recorded. This required state-of-the-art listening equipment and a team of skilled linguists and analysts fluent in Russian and German. The planning alone took months, involving thousands of detailed blueprints, geological surveys, and logistical calculations. Every contingency was considered, every risk assessed. The objective was clear: create a clandestine listening post that would provide an unprecedented intelligence advantage, without ever being discovered by the Soviets. The success of the entire operation hinged on absolute secrecy and flawless execution. The Berlin Tunnel was not just an engineering feat, it was a psychological operation. designed to exploit a critical vulnerability in the Iron Curtain. It was a bold statement that no barrier, not even a physical border, could stop the flow of information. The stage was now set for the actual digging, a grueling, dangerous, and utterly secret endeavor that would take over a year to complete. The fate of the Cold War, and perhaps the world, depended on it. The actual digging of the Berlin Tunnel, which began in September 1954, was a monumental undertaking fraught with danger and challenges. Imagine working deep underground, in cramped, oxygen-deprived conditions, knowing that the slightest mistake could expose the entire operation and spark an international incident. The initial phase involved sinking a vertical shaft from the radar station warehouse down to the target depth. This shaft was then connected to the main horizontal tunnel, which would stretch approximately 1,476 feet, 450 meters, under the Soviet sector. The tunnelers, a combination of American and British engineers and German workers specially vetted and trained, faced immense physical and psychological pressures. The work was relentless, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, often in 3 shifts. The tunnel itself was not wide enough for heavy machinery, so much of the excavation was done by hand, using picks, shovels, and small pneumatic drills. The excavated earth was loaded onto small carts and manually pushed back to the main shaft, where it was lifted to the surface. The geological conditions of Berlin proved to be as challenging as anticipated. The tunnelers encountered pockets of groundwater, requiring constant pumping to prevent flooding. Specialized techniques were developed to reinforce the tunnel walls, using steel ribs and wooden planks to prevent collapse. The constant threat of ground instability meant that every foot of progress had to be carefully secured. Beyond the physical dangers, there was the ever-present psychological strain of working in complete secrecy. The tunnelers were isolated from the outside world, their lives entirely consumed by the project. They couldn't discuss their work with family or friends. The knowledge that they were part of something so globally significant, yet so utterly hidden, created a unique blend of pride and anxiety. To maintain absolute secrecy, all equipment used in the tunnel was modified to be as quiet as possible. Diesel generators were housed in soundproofed compartments. Ventilation systems were designed to operate silently. Even the carts for transporting excavated earth were fitted with rubber wheels to minimize noise. The concern was that Soviet listening devices or seismic sensors on the surface could detect the vibrations or sounds of the digging. This extreme caution extended to every aspect of the operation. Communication within the tunnel was done through a secure internal telephone system, and all conversations were in code or hushed tones. The workers were constantly reminded of the need for discretion, both on and off-site. As the tunnel progressed, the proximity to the Soviet border became more acute. The workers knew they were directly beneath Soviet territory, just a few feet below their feet. The thought that at any moment they could break through into a sewer line or hit an undetected utility pipe or simply be discovered by a patrolling Soviet soldier was a constant source of tension. Food and supplies were brought into the compound under the guise of provisions for the radar station. Workers lived in makeshift barracks within the compound, rarely leaving to minimize any risk of being compromised. Recreation was limited, usually confined to card games, reading, or quiet conversation. The stress was immense, leading to occasional arguments and frayed nerves, but the shared sense of purpose generally kept the team cohesive. After months of painstaking labor, the tunnel reached its target, the East German cable junction. This was the most critical and delicate phase of the operation. The engineers had to carefully excavate around the cables, exposing them without causing any damage. The slightest tremor or accidental cut could alert the Soviets to their presence. Specialized tools were developed for this precise work. Once the cables were exposed, the next step was to tap them. This involved splicing into the existing lines and attaching highly sensitive listening devices. The tapping process itself was a marvel of covert engineering. The taps had to be undetectable, both electronically and visually. They had to draw minimal power to avoid any fluctuations in the East German network that might trigger an alarm. British technicians, with their expertise in telecommunications and signal intelligence, played a crucial role in this phase. The signals from the tapped cables were then routed back through the tunnel to the listening post in the West Berlin warehouse. Here, a sophisticated array of recording equipment, amplifiers, and filtering systems transformed the raw electrical impulses into audible conversations and data streams. Linguists and intelligence analysts, primarily from the CIA, began the arduous task of monitoring, translating, and analyzing the intercepted communications. The work was slow, painstaking, and required immense patience. They listened to countless hours of mundane conversations, waiting for the snippets of vital intelligence. The intelligence harvested from the Berlin Tunnel was invaluable. It provided a direct line into the Soviet military command, offering insights into troop movements, logistical plans, and strategic intentions. It also provided a window into the Stasi's operations, revealing their internal structure, methods, and targets. This intelligence provided Western powers with a significant advantage in the ongoing Cold War chess match. It allowed them to anticipate Soviet moves, counter propaganda, and understand the internal dynamics of the communist bloc in a way that had previously been impossible. The tunnel itself became a symbol of Western ingenuity and defiance. It was a testament to the willingness of the United States and Great Britain to go to extraordinary lengths to gain an intelligence edge. The sheer audacity of digging a tunnel under the nose of their adversary and successfully tapping their most secret communications for an extended period was a source of immense pride for those involved. The digging phase, from breaking ground to successfully tapping the cables, took approximately 14 months, concluding in February 1955. The tunnel was now fully operational, a hidden artery of intelligence flowing directly from the heart of the East into the West. The real work, the patient, continuous eavesdropping, had just begun. The completion of the Berlin Tunnel marked the beginning of its operational phase, transforming the innocuous-looking radar station into a bustling, round-the-clock listening post. Inside the heavily secured warehouse in West Berlin, a team of highly trained intelligence analysts and linguists, primarily from the CIA, began the meticulous work of intercepting and processing the vast streams of communication flowing through the tapped East German cables. This wasn't a simple matter of plugging in a pair of headphones. The tapped cables carried hundreds of individual telephone and telex lines, all interwoven. The raw signals were complex, often noisy, and required sophisticated equipment to separate, amplify, and filter. The listening post was equipped with state-of-the-art, for the mid-1950s, reel-to-reel tape recorders, signal analyzers, and patch panels that allowed technicians to select and isolate specific lines of interest. The analysts, fluent in Russian and German, sat for hours on end, wearing heavy headphones, patiently sifting through conversations. They were looking for key words, specific voices, operational codes, and any information that could provide insights into Soviet and East German military, political, or intelligence activities. The work was tedious, demanding, and often mind-numbingly boring, punctuated by moments of intense excitement when a truly valuable piece of intelligence was discovered. The sheer volume of intercepted material was immense. Thousands of hours of recorded conversations and telex messages accumulated daily. This required a massive effort in transcription, translation, and cataloging. A dedicated team processed the raw intelligence, creating summaries, transcripts, and detailed reports that were then forwarded up the intelligence chain of command to Washington and London. The intelligence harvested from the Berlin Tunnel was a treasure trove. It provided unprecedented insights into the Soviet military presence in East Germany, including troop deployments, logistical plans, and communications protocols. It revealed the internal workings of the East German Stasi, including their surveillance methods, agent networks, and targets within West Berlin. It also offered a window into the political discussions and economic plans of the East German government. One of the most significant intelligence gains was the ability to confirm the identity of Soviet intelligence officers and their networks. By cross-referencing intercepted conversations with other sources, the CIA and MI6 were able to unmask agents, track their movements, and understand their operational methods. This was invaluable for counter-espionage efforts. The intelligence gleaned from the tunnel allowed Western powers to anticipate Soviet moves in various geopolitical contexts. For example, insights into Soviet economic intentions or military readiness could inform diplomatic strategies or reinforce deterrence. It also provided a clearer picture of the political stability within East Germany, helping to gauge potential unrest or shifts in power. The tunnel operated in absolute secrecy for nearly 11 months, a period of unprecedented intelligence gathering. The Soviets, completely unaware that their most sensitive communications were being routinely intercepted, continued to use the cables with a false sense of security. This long period of successful operation was a testament to the meticulous planning, engineering brilliance, and the dedication of the entire Anglo-American team. However, unbeknownst to the CIA and MI6, the secret was already compromised before the digging even began. George Blake, a highly placed double agent working for the Soviets within MI6, had been briefed on Operation Gold, or Stopwatch, in its early planning stages. Blake, a committed communist, immediately passed detailed information about the tunnel's location and purpose to his Soviet handlers. The Soviets were faced with a dilemma. If they immediately exposed the tunnel, it would reveal that they had a mole within MI6, a source far more valuable than the tunnel itself. They chose to protect Blake. So, from the moment the first shovel hit the dirt, the Soviets knew. They allowed the tunnel to be completed, to operate for nearly a year, and to intercept their communications, all while carefully feeding it a mixture of genuine and disinformation. This sophisticated counterintelligence operation allowed the Soviets to not only protect their source, but also to control what intelligence the West was receiving. It was a masterclass in Cold War deception. The purpose of this controlled intelligence flow was twofold. First, to keep Blake's identity a secret, and second, to potentially mislead Western intelligence. By mixing genuine information with carefully crafted disinformation, the Soviets could sow confusion, influence Western assessments, and potentially distract from their true intentions elsewhere. The Americans and British continued to operate the listening post, believing they were gaining unadulterated access to Soviet secrets. The atmosphere within the listening post was one of quiet triumph. They believed they had achieved the impossible. The work was demanding, but the perceived value of the intelligence kept morale high. They were, in their minds, winning the intelligence war. During this period, the Berlin Tunnel reportedly collected approximately 400,000 conversations and 90,000 telex messages. This vast amount of raw data required an equally vast effort in processing and analysis, providing full-time employment for hundreds of intelligence personnel on both sides of the Atlantic. The intelligence continued to flow, day in and day out, confirming existing suspicions, revealing new details, and seemingly giving the West a clear advantage. But it was an advantage built on a foundation of deception, a subtle manipulation orchestrated by an enemy who knew their every move. The unsuspecting intelligence analysts continued their work, unaware that they were part of a larger, more intricate game being played at the highest levels of Cold War espionage. The end of the tunnel's operation was looming, and its exposure would be as dramatic as its construction. The long charade of the Berlin Tunnel finally came to an end on April 21, 1956, the Soviets, having extracted maximum value from George Blake and deciding it was time to close the operation without exposing their mole, discovered the tunnel. The official story put out by the Soviets and East Germans was that a routine cable repair crew stumbled upon the clandestine listening post. They claimed to have discovered a suspiciously placed cable emerging from the ground, which led them to the tunnel entrance. The scene was meticulously staged for maximum propaganda effect. News crews were brought in from around the world. Soviet and East German officials gave impassioned speeches denouncing the gangster methods and barbaric acts of Western imperialism. They showcased the tunnel as undeniable proof of American and British aggression and espionage against the socialist states. For the CIA and MI6, the public exposure was a devastating blow. The project, which had cost an estimated $6.7 million, over $60 million in today's money, and countless hours of human effort, was compromised. The initial reaction was one of shock and disbelief. How could their meticulously guarded secret have been discovered? There was an immediate and intense internal investigation to determine the cause of the breach. The Soviets, of course, never revealed that they had known about the tunnel from the beginning. They maintained their cover story, allowing the Western intelligence agencies to scramble for answers and conduct their damage assessments. Despite the operational failure, the intelligence gathered from the tunnel was quickly analyzed for its potential impact on exposed agents or operations. However, because the Soviets had controlled the information flow, the damage was likely less severe than it would have been if the tunnel had been genuinely compromised by accident. George Blake's role as a double agent remained undiscovered for several more years. He continued to provide intelligence to the Soviets until his eventual exposure in 1961, when he was arrested, tried, and imprisoned in the UK. Blake later famously escaped from Wormwood Scrubs prison in 1966 and defected to the Soviet Union, where he lived as a hero until his death in 2020. The public revelation of the Berlin Tunnel was a major propaganda victory for the Soviet bloc. They used it to paint the West as aggressive, deceitful, and contemptuous of international law. The incident was presented as justification for their own security measures and further solidified the narrative of an embattled socialist paradise surrounded by hostile capitalist forces. In the West, particularly in the United States, the tunnel's exposure was an embarrassment. Headlines screamed about the spy tunnel, and there was public and political outcry. However, behind the scenes, intelligence officials recognized the immense value of the intelligence that had been gathered, even if it was ultimately compromised. They quietly acknowledged the ambition and technical brilliance of the operation. The physical tunnel itself became a morbid tourist attraction for East Germans, a symbol of Western intrigue. The Soviets eventually filled in the tunnel and destroyed the listening post equipment, ensuring it could never be reactivated. Despite its dramatic end, the Berlin Tunnel remains a legendary feat of Cold War espionage. It pushed the boundaries of engineering, covert operations, and intelligence gathering. It demonstrated the lengths to which both sides were willing to go to gain an advantage in the shadow war. The story of the Berlin Tunnel also highlights the complex and often murky ethics of espionage. Was it justified to violate another nation's sovereignty, even in the context of the Cold War? For the intelligence agencies, the answer was a resounding yes. The stakes were too high, the information too vital. The tunnel, even with its premature exposure, provided invaluable intelligence that influenced Western policy for years. It offered a rare glimpse into the closed world of Soviet and East German command structures, revealing vulnerabilities and intentions that would have been impossible to ascertain through other means. In a bizarre twist of fate, after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the reunification of Germany, parts of the original tunnel were rediscovered during construction work. Sections of the tunnel, preserved remarkably well, were excavated and are now on display in museums, including the Allied Museum in Berlin. These sections serve as tangible reminders of a time when the world was divided and secrets were buried deep underground. The legacy of the Berlin Tunnel is multifaceted. It stands as a testament to human ingenuity and determination in the face of daunting challenges. It's a story of meticulous planning, engineering brilliance, and unwavering dedication from those involved. But it's also a cautionary tale about the inherent risks of espionage and the ever-present threat of betrayal. The fact that the Soviets knew about the tunnel from the very beginning, thanks to a high-ranking mole, adds another layer of complexity to the narrative. It transformed what the West thought was a pure intelligence coup into a sophisticated game of cat and mouse, where one side held all the cards. Yet even with this knowledge, the intelligence gained from the tunnel was still significant. The Soviets, in their effort to protect their source, allowed genuine information to flow, believing they could control the overall narrative. This speaks to the desperation on both sides to understand the other. The Berlin Tunnel remains a powerful symbol of the Cold War, a period defined by shadowy operations, technological races, and the constant unspoken threat of global conflict. It's a reminder that even in the absence of open warfare, the battle for information was waged with relentless intensity, sometimes literally beneath the very ground people walked upon. The Berlin Tunnel, despite its ignominious public exposure, left an indelible mark on the history of espionage and intelligence gathering. Its legacy is a complex tapestry woven with threads of triumph, technological innovation, and a stark reminder of the ever-present dangers of deception in the shadow world of spycraft. For Western intelligence agencies, particularly the CIA and MI6, the tunnel was initially hailed as a brilliant, if ultimately compromised, success. The sheer volume and quality of intelligence gathered during its operational phase provided an unparalleled understanding of Soviet and East German military capabilities and intentions. It was a direct pipeline into the enemy's nervous system, offering a strategic advantage that few other intelligence assets could provide. The information gleaned from the tunnel helped shape Western foreign policy, informed diplomatic strategies, and provided crucial insights into the inner workings of the Eastern Bloc during a critical period of the Cold War. It confirmed suspicions, revealed new threats, and helped to counter Soviet propaganda and disinformation efforts. Even with the knowledge that some of the information might have been tainted by Soviet counterintelligence, analysts could still derive significant value by cross-referencing it with other sources. The tunnel also showcased the incredible technical capabilities of the Anglo-American intelligence partnership. It was a marvel of engineering, a testament to human ingenuity in overcoming immense logistical and physical challenges. The methods developed for silent excavation, cable tapping, and signal processing pushed the boundaries of covert technology. These innovations would go on to influence future intelligence operations for decades. However, the revelation of George Blake's treachery fundamentally altered the perception of the tunnel's success. The fact that the Soviets knew about the operation from its inception and allowed it to run as a controlled channel for a year turned what was thought to be a massive intelligence coup into a complex psychological operation. This knowledge forced a painful reevaluation of the intelligence gathered. How much was genuine? How much was designed to mislead? This incident underscored the critical importance of counterintelligence and the devastating impact of a well-placed mole. It led to increased vigilance, more rigorous vetting processes, and a deeper understanding of the sophisticated deception tactics employed by the KGB. For the Soviets, the tunnel represented a propaganda windfall. Its public exposure allowed them to portray the West as aggressive and conspiratorial, reinforcing their narrative of a besieged socialist state. But more importantly, it allowed them to maintain the invaluable asset that was George Blake, feeding him intelligence and protecting his cover until his usefulness had run its course. The long-term impact on intelligence tradecraft was significant. The Berlin Tunnel became a case study in both the potential and the pitfalls of signals intelligence, SIGINT. It highlighted the need for multiple, independent intelligence sources to corroborate information and guard against deception. It also demonstrated the power of human intelligence, HUMANT, in this case George Blake, to compromise even the most technologically advanced operations. Today, the physical remnants of the Berlin Tunnel serve as a powerful historical artifact. Sections of the tunnel are preserved in museums, offering visitors a tangible connection to this extraordinary chapter of the Cold War. These displays stand as silent witnesses to the ingenuity, danger, and intrigue that defined that era. The story of the Berlin Tunnel is also a story about people. The engineers who risked their lives digging in perilous conditions, the analysts who toiled for hours in the listening post, and the agents who operated in the shadows. It's a reminder that even in the grand sweep of geopolitical conflict, individual human effort and decision-making can have profound impacts. In popular culture, the Berlin Tunnel has inspired numerous books, documentaries, and fictional accounts, cementing its place as one of the most famous spy operations in history. Its dramatic narrative, complete with daring excavation, secret listening, and ultimate betrayal, is ripe for storytelling. The Berlin Tunnel remains a potent symbol of the Cold War itself, a hidden battle fought beneath the surface where information was the most valuable commodity, and the lines between truth and deception were constantly blurred. It stands as a testament to the lengths that nations will go to gain an advantage in the relentless global struggle for power and influence. It reminds us that even when the physical walls come down, the shadows of the past continue to reveal their secrets, offering lessons for a world that still grapples with the complexities of intelligence, security, and international relations. The audacity of the Berlin Tunnel continues to resonate, a silent subterranean echo of a bygone era. The Berlin Tunnel, a secret passage beneath a divided city, an ambitious plan to steal the enemy's secrets conceived in the shadows of the Cold War. It was an operation of unprecedented scale and daring, showcasing the ingenuity and determination of Western intelligence agencies. From the painstaking planning and geological surveys to the relentless, dangerous work of digging, every phase of the tunnel's construction was a marvel of covert engineering. Imagine the mental and physical toll on the men who toiled in the cramped, dark, and damp conditions, knowing that at any moment Their efforts could be exposed with potentially catastrophic consequences. They were not just digging a tunnel, they were digging a lifeline to vital intelligence, a conduit to the enemy's most guarded thoughts. For nearly a year, the tunnel delivered an intelligence bonanza. Hundreds of thousands of conversations, telex messages, and data streams flowed into the Western listening post, offering an unparalleled window into Soviet military movements, political intentions, and the inner workings of the East German state. It was an intelligence analyst's dream, providing insights that shaped policy and offered a strategic advantage in the high-stakes game of Cold War espionage. Yet the true story of the Berlin Tunnel is even more intricate and astonishing than its initial unveiling suggested. The layer of betrayal, the presence of George Blake, the double agent who compromised the operation from the very beginning, adds a profound twist to its narrative. The Soviets knew. They allowed the tunnel to be built, to operate, and to collect information, all while carefully controlling the flow of intelligence and protecting their invaluable mole. This elevated the entire operation from a mere intelligence-gathering mission into a sophisticated game of deception and counter-deception played out beneath the streets of Berlin. The public exposure of the tunnel was a propaganda coup for the Soviets, an embarrassment for the West, but ultimately it served its purpose for all sides. The intelligence gained, even if carefully managed by the Soviets, was still significant. And for the Soviets, the exposure allowed them to close a compromised channel while still protecting their source for several more years. Today, the Berlin Tunnel stands as a powerful testament to a bygone era. Its physical remnants, preserved in museums, serve as tangible links to a time when the world was starkly divided and the battle for information was waged with relentless intensity, often in the deepest shadows. It reminds us of the human element in espionage, the brilliance of engineers, the tireless dedication of analysts, and the devastating impact of betrayal. The legacy of the Berlin Tunnel is multifaceted. It represents the height of Cold War ingenuity and the depth of its intrigue. It is a story that continues to fascinate, revealing how nations went to extraordinary lengths to uncover each other's secrets, pushing the boundaries of technology, human endurance, and moral ambiguity. The Berlin Tunnel, the CIA's most audacious spy operation, a tale of digging for secrets, a triumph of engineering, and a complex dance of deception that forever etched its place in the annals of espionage history.